Hello and welcome back to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. My name is John Kier, and joining me, as always, is my co-host Austin Davidson from Long Island, New York.
Heyo.
It's season 2, episode 37. Another week of NFL football on our hands. Week 6 around the NFL. First things first, let's get to the Thursday night football game, which just wrapped up. I don't know if you got a chance to see a decent amount of it, Austin. The Eagles improved to 5-1, downing the Carolina Panthers. The Carolina Panthers in Carolina by final score of 28-23. What were your initial thoughts of that game?
That went down about as I was expected. I on Twitter, follow us on Twitter by the way, at Stronger Than Steel at Stronger Than Steel. My bad. And I made the prediction that they would win outright. The Panthers were favorited -3. And I don't think the Panthers are that good. I do believe that they did take down the Patriots. I mean, I don't believe that happened, but I believe they're okay. But I think the Eagles are the real deal here. I think the Eagles are a team that's might go far in this year's playoffs. I don't like anyone else in the NFC very much, to be honest. And I have a lot of hopes for the Eagles, so I had them winning. And honestly, the Eagles would have ran away from this had it not been for penalties. They had something like 116 yards of penalties in this game, and that's pretty rough. So I think that the Eagles should have won this a little more easier, in my opinion. So what did you think of the game?
Yeah, the Panthers are obviously, as we know, pretty short-handed without Greg Olsen right now. They've probably done more than any other team to separate themselves as far as how good they are. Maybe outside of the Falcons, the only other teams with one loss in the conference besides the Eagles are the uh, Falcons and the Green Bay Packers, who got beaten down by the very same Falcons earlier this season. So, yeah, I'd have to say the Eagles right now are the early favorites to win the NFC right now. Still a lot of time to go, but they've played 4 of their first 6 games on the road, and they've come out with a 5-1 record. So that's very impressive to say the least. And they're 4-0 in their conference, and have the best point differential in the NFC right now. I don't know if it's of the whole NFL. No, it's not for the whole NFL. Uh, Take a guess at which team has the best point differential in the NFL right now.
Is it the Jaguars?
It is. It is the Jaguars.
Oh my God! Of course it is.
Right behind them is the Chiefs at 53 points, who the Steelers are playing this week, but we'll get to that in a moment. Just recapping some other interesting things going on around the NFL. First, from earlier this week, Adrian Peterson, one of the best running backs of the last generation, was traded from the Saints to the Cardinals, who in turn released one of the other better backs from this past decade, and Chris Johnson. What do you make of that move?
I found it funny mostly that Chris Johnson earlier in the year tweeted that AP needed more touches, and it came back to bite him. It was quite ironic because he got traded and he got cut. They came from the same draft. The Cardinals almost used that pick on Adrian Peterson, so it's just kind of interesting that they get him 10 years later, and they have really old people on that team. On that offense specifically, it's Adrian Peterson, Carson Palmer, and
Larry Fitzgerald.
There we go. And the name escaped me. But that's a really, really old team. This team is about to get bad really quick, and it's going to be bad for a while because they're a team that needs to go through rebuilding. And it's kind of like the 2013 Steelers, but worse, because the 2013 Steelers were at least an 8-8 team. This team is already bad. Other than that, more on the trade, I think it was necessary. The Cardinals had the worst rushing offense without David Johnson, and that's just terrible. I mean, Andre Ellington has been pretty good as a pass catcher. He's been targeted 10, 14 times a game, and he's caught 9 of them each game, which is good, but he's not good as a runner. He was averaging 2.3 yards a carry. Chris Johnson was averaging 2.5. So Adrian Peterson wasn't being used in New Orleans. I think New Orleans won from this. I think Cardinals won from this. I think it was a good trade. But I don't think Adrian Peterson's that amazing anymore. He's definitely not what he was a few years ago. But it's still an upgrade, I think. What do you think?
I think he's washed. I think this trade made sense, but it doesn't matter. I think we already knew Chris Johnson was beyond past his prime, and I think Adrian Peterson doesn't have much left to give either. There's no reason for me to think he's going to do anything impactful given the state of that offense and their offensive line. Both teams are not very good. The Saints are 2-2, and their offense is okay, but their defense is really going to hold them back. And the Cardinals are just in bad shape right now. That is not a good football team at all. So I don't really think it matters at all, to be honest with you. And I think this is probably the last year Adrian Peterson will be in the NFL. Elsewhere, a couple big injuries for several teams. First and foremost, the Texans lost J.J. Watt for the season. Thus, the Steelers and Texans Christmas Day matchup loses a bit of its luster with the whole Watt and Watt matchup. So that's disappointing. They also lost Whitney Merciless, another one of their pass rushers for the season. And the Giants, who are now 0-5, lost not just Odell Beckham Jr. for the season, but they also lost Brandon Marshall for the season, and they also lost Dwayne Harris. I don't know if that was a season-ending injury, and they lost another receiver too, didn't they?
Dwayne Harris was season-ending, and they lost Sterling Shepard for a few weeks.
So the football gods are not shining brightly on either of those teams. What's the outlook for these teams right now?
Well, OBJ hurt the same ankle that he hurt earlier in the preseason. That's not good. It's already hard enough to come back from an ankle injury and retain the same speed, but hurting it twice in the matter of a mere few months is not good. And this injury was brutal. Wow, I can't speak tonight. Was brutal. While I don't really like OBJ as much as other people do, I hope he comes back strong since he is one of the league's top receivers. For the rest of the Giants, they're in awful shape. With their lack of wide receiver depth, they may just not win a game all season. I can say for a fact they will definitely not beat the Broncos this week, that's for sure. As for JJ, it's not good for him either. Up until last year, he had never missed a game. Now in back-to-back years, he has suffered season-ending injuries relatively early on, which really sucks, since he may be the best player in the entire NFL when he is healthy. However, I think he will be able to bounce back still. I have hope. As for the Texans, they still have hopes to be a playoff team without him. Deshaun Watson has been incredible for them, and all they need to do is take down the Jaguars, and they can make the playoffs. What do you have to say about these injuries?
Well, it's really unfortunate for the Giants in a matchup of winless teams. The football gods frowned upon them, and they lost their entire receiving core, including their two best receivers for the season. It's looking really bad for them. The good news for, I guess, Odell Beckham Jr. and J.J. Watt is that their season-ending injuries came early in the year, not late, so they will not miss any time next season as well. As far as JJ goes, and it's disappointing. One of the best players in the NFL, three-time Defensive Player of the Year award winner. Honestly, he's probably still in his prime. He might be exiting that prime now that he's had a couple of bad season-ending injuries, but he's still definitely an impactful player, and I would think one of the better players in the league still, so it's definitely disappointing for him to be gone. But luckily, despite losing two of their best pass rushers, the Texans' offense has kind of revived itself, and it's become a strength of this team. So they're certainly in it still, and like you said, the Jaguars are the biggest competition in that division right now. So it'll be interesting to see for sure. Some NFL news today. Really, the big story is that Cowboys running back Ezekiel Elliott, his suspension was overturned in court. So that means after several, another point on the timeline here, Ezekiel Elliott's suspension is back. It's been reinstated, which means it's effective immediately. So Elliott will serve a 6-game suspension starting next week because the Cowboys are on their bye week. So I believe that means the next game he'd be able to play is the week before Thanksgiving, which is obviously quite a long ways away. And the Cowboys are sitting at 2-3 right now. Haven't looked that good, and they're missing now their best offensive weapon outside of Dez Bryant. So that's quite a big blow, don't you think?
Yeah, he's not going to be back until week 13, which that sucks. The Cowboys have put a lot of their they've let Dak and Zeke carry this team, especially last year. and this year hasn't really worked out as much. The offensive line surprisingly hasn't played as great. I mean, they're still amazing, but they haven't been as amazing, which is odd. And Des Bryant continues to just fade away in the NFL. It's already be basically done. I don't know what happened to him. It feels like he was just an elite wide receiver a year or two ago, and now he's just gone. He's just a normal wide receiver. I don't know. The team is not good, and losing Zeke is not good for them. What do you think?
It's interesting, for sure. It's definitely a tough blow for them. I never thought Des Bryant was that great of a receiver, anyways. I thought he was a better receiver, but he hasn't been playing well. The Cowboys' offense, oddly enough, has kind of been doing something similar to the Steelers. Maybe not as extreme, but they've really disappointed, and their defense hasn't been that good either. So they still have time to turn it around, but it's clear that they overachieved last year, and if anything, now this year they might be underachieving, which losing their last year's rookie sensation Ezekiel Elliott for a big portion of the schedule is something that they really cannot afford at this time. Moving on into Steelers news, some a notable former Steeler receiver, Santonio Holmes, Super Bowl 43 MVP, officially retired as a Pittsburgh Steeler despite having not played since 2014. Do you remember his time in Pittsburgh, the former first round pick in 2006? Do you have any parting thoughts for Holmes?
Well, he's going to go down with the greatest catch in Super Bowl history up until someone else takes it. And, while his career after that point went downhill rapidly, I choose to remember his time with the Steelers as that receiver that made that great toe tap catch. And he was Tony Toe Tap before Brown was Tony Toe Tap. So I always find that funny that they end in Tonio, and they both are known for their toe tapping ability. Or, well, Santonio Holmes only for the one play, but still. What do you think?
Well, everyone is going to remember him for his fantastic run during the 08, I guess 09 playoffs, really. And although he never really quite reached that same level, he had 1 year with 1,000 yards. That was actually the season after his Super Bowl MVP award. He was at his best when it mattered the most, and that's what really counts with him. And he really is the gift that keeps on giving. You talked about the connection between the toe tapping. Well, Holmes and one Steelers receiver are forever linked, and Holmes was traded in the 2010 offseason to the Jets for a sixth-round pick, which was later spent on Central Michigan product Antonio Brown, and the rest is history. So, in effect, Holmes is partially responsible for Antonio Brown going to the Steelers, which means that as long as Antonio Brown produces until the day he leaves the Steelers, Santonio Holmes will be at least partially responsible for everything that he did in at least the sense that he got traded for him. So that's just an interesting way that their careers are going to be tied in together. But yeah, it's interesting to note that the Steelers' 6 Super Bowls. I'm thinking about this now. 1, 2, 3. Of their 6, 3 of them have been 3 of their Super Bowl MVPs were wide receivers. There's Hines Ward and Holmes, the most recent ones, and Lynn Swann in Super Bowl 10. So that's just something interesting to think about. In other news, we'll get into the injury report in a minute, but Marcus Gilbert is expected to make his return to the Steelers lineup this week, and that's definitely some good news. Chris Hubbard has struggled in pass protection the last couple weeks, but Gilbert is an underappreciated offensive lineman for sure. And James Harrison and Eli Rogers are also expected to make it back into the lineup this week. We'll get more into that later. But as far as the injury report goes, it's pretty short for the Steelers. Marcus Gilbert has been a full participant in practice up until Friday. We don't have Friday right now, but he was a full participant. Ryan Shazier was limited on Wednesday, full yesterday. Marquise Pouncey did not practice on Wednesday, is full participant yesterday. Ramon Foster did not practice Wednesday or Thursday, so he's someone you might have to look out for. The Chiefs have a ton of players on the injury report right now. Players that are right now did not participate on Thursday include Steven Terrell, their safety, Justin Houston, their linebacker, who already has 5.5 sacks, Chris Conley, their receiver, and Laurent Duvernay Tardif, a guard. Uh, I know there were a couple other things you wanted to mention, specifically with Travis Kelce, correct?
Uh, yeah, only specifically, Travis Kelsey was limited today, and he only just cleared the first part of the concussion protocol where he could practice in limited amounts. So on Sunday, he's basically probably going to be listed for questionable on Sunday. We don't know that yet. His game stats might come out as maybe doubtful, but he has a chance to both play and not play. It's about 50-50 at the moment. So that's all I had to say.
Well, it's going to be an interesting matchup regardless. He's been considered one of the better options for the Chiefs offense this year, but we'll start by looking at the Chiefs defense and Ben Roethlisberger and the Steelers offense coming off of a historically bad performance against the Jacksonville Jaguars. But when you look at the numbers, the Chiefs defense might not be as good as you would think, Austin, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. I have hope for the offense to bounce back here. The Chiefs' defense, while normally talked about highly, just doesn't look that great when looking at the stats. They rank 25th in passing yards per game and 20th in rushing yards per game. That's definitely less than what I had expected for how people talked about this Chiefs team. Now that this team is facing a worse pass defense, talk about the Steelers, they'll now rush, as that's what makes sense to them. That's what's going to happen. But seriously, the plan should be to mix up the play calling this week. I don't think the coaches gave up on Ben, so I expect a lot of throws here. And quite frankly, I'm okay with that as long as the rush is mixed in because I haven't given up on Ben either. I also like both Antonio Brown and now, surprisingly, Smith-Schuster's matchups as he overtook Brian in snap counts last week. Mostly I'm looking at Smith-Schuster's potential matchup with Terrence Mitchell and licking my lips because I don't know how many of you have watched Chiefs games this year, but he's bad. He's really, really bad. He had one game against the Chargers, and that was mostly on Rivers. But other than that, he's not very good at coverage. Other than that, looking at what's scary about the Chiefs defense, in my opinion, is Justin Houston, Chris Jones, and Marcus Peters. While Peters isn't getting quite as many interceptions as he has in previous years, I think he's still doing pretty good for the Chiefs. Then Justin Houston has always been a monster. It's just always been whether or not he was healthy, and that's a huge factor in this game since he hasn't practiced yet this week, which is probably leaning towards him being out this week. Then Chris Jones, known as the one whose junk slipped out at the combine, he's also had quite the impressive year with two of the. Sorry, that was supposed to be a sentence ender. With two of the Chiefs' best players on defense being pass rushers, the Steelers' offensive line is going to need to really play at its best here. This is where the Chiefs' defense thrives in sacks. They have 14 on the year, that ranks 8th in the league, and over a third of those came from Justin Houston, which is insane. So as I said, the offensive line will need to be at its best. And it really sucks that with Marcus Gilbert coming back, Foster's probably going to be out. So that's rough, but to make up for it, Justin Houston is probably going to be out, and that's more than a third of their sacks gone. So that's something good. But that's all I have to say about the offense. What do you have to say?
Well, they can't play much worse than they did on Sunday. It's interesting to look at the stats like you were mentioning. It's, yes, only through 5 games, but they kind of look familiar to the way they did in January when the Steelers were playing them in the playoffs. I'm sure you remember that game well, Austin. We watched that game together. The story for this defense over the last few years, it hasn't been about, bone crushing, defending every blade of grass, as Mike Tomlin likes to say, but it's been more about bending and not breaking and taking advantage of the offense's mistakes. So even though the numbers aren't great, this is still a respectable unit for sure. I think the Steelers, the key here is clear, and that's run the ball and run it well. In 2 games against the Chiefs last year, Le'Veon Bell ran for 314 yards, including a record-setting 170-yard performance in the playoffs in the divisional round. Outside of the win in Baltimore 2 weeks ago, the Steelers' running game has been bad. Having Ben Roethlisberger throw the ball a ton on the road against the undefeated Chiefs and Marcus Peters seems like trouble to me, especially with the potential for Justin Houston to be out there. Obviously, it'll be different if he isn't. I still think he'll play better, but I think being able to establish the run is going to make reviving the passing game a lot easier. And then as far as the passing game itself goes, what's the one thing that they've missed most this season outside of other receiver contributions, Austin. I'm talking about what's the one thing they haven't really done on offense? Like, where haven't they passed the ball really?
On
I'm
I don't actually know what you're going for here. I apologize.
That's okay. I'm talking about a specific area, and I'm talking about the intermediate middle of the field. I talked about it earlier this season. Outside of Antonio Brown, would you believe that pretty much nobody has worked the middle of the field well outside of Juju Smith-Schuster a little bit?
Really? Do you know the stat line?
I don't have specific stats, but I mean, I can tell you like the stats of the other Steelers receivers, and specifically that Martavis Bryant had been running a lot of inside routes. I know you've seen a lot of that this year, and he hasn't done well at all. He's caught less than 50% of his targets this year. I know that. I think I put that in the stat line that we have up in front of us. I don't know if you can double check that, but I'm pretty sure he's had 15 catches on 31 targets. And that's not good. A lot of times I've seen him run routes over the middle where he's caught it and then immediately get tackled. Bryant isn't a very elusive receiver. He's more of a straight line speed, big and strong kind of guy. So the Steelers need to reestablish someone that works over the middle pretty well. It's not Martavis Bryant, as I just mentioned. So far this year, it hasn't been Eli Rogers. He's caught 6 passes in 3 games. Vance McDonald, come on now, he doesn't have a catch. Juju Smith-Schuster and Jesse James have done a decent job, but they haven't done enough on their own for Ben Roethlisberger to kind of be able to open up the rest of the passing game. Um, if someone can get going over the middle, I think it's going to help establish the rest of the offense and maybe free up Antonio Brown. I wish the Steelers would use him more in the slot like they have in the past. Uh, I think doing that's going to help set up touchdowns in the red zone as opposed to the Steelers stalling out, which I'm sure you remember happened 6 times in the playoff game last year. Chris Boswell bailed them out, and the Steelers are going to have to score touchdowns because the Chiefs' offense is a lot better now in October of this year than it was in January, wasn't it?
It really was. I apologize. I'm out of it today. Can you just repeat that one more time?
I was saying that the Steelers are really going to need to score touchdowns in the red zone and not field goals this year like they did in the playoff game last year, because the Chiefs' offense is much better right now right now in October than it was back in January.
Yeah, totally agree. That 18-point win is not going to cover it again. I forget the stats on that, but that was insanely crazy how the Steelers won that. That still shouldn't have happened in my mind.
In any case, the Steelers are going to have a much taller task on defense this year than they did just a few months ago, right? Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, it's really scary here. The Chiefs team on offense is scary at the moment. Both Kareem Hunt and Alex Smith are early on MVP candidates, and combine that with one of the top receivers this year and a top 3 tight end, and this offense just looks unstoppable. Luckily for the Steelers, Kelsey hasn't quite cleared the concussion protocol, as I said, so he may not play on Sunday. Still, though, I look at Kareem Hunt as the main problem. The Steelers have been unable to stop the run, as shown by Jordan Howard, Tariq Cohen, and Leonard Fournette, at least against decent running backs. They were able to shut it down against the Vikings, and they were able to shut it down against the Ravens. I shouldn't even say good, because before Dalvin Cook went down to injury, he was doing pretty good. It's inconsistent. That is the better word. The Steelers' run defense has been inconsistent. It's just scary because no one else has been able to stop him. Talking about Kareem Hunt. I don't know how the Steelers are going to, but I'm hoping for someone to step up and rush defense, because that's going to be the story of the game. Can the Steelers finally defend the rush? That's really all it is. I believe in this team to stop the pass, but that doesn't matter if the Chiefs run all over them like the Bears and Jaguars did, and they don't even have to throw. So what does the defensive outlook look like for you?
Well, it could be a problem. When you think about it, this is really the first time the Steelers' defense is going to be tested this season. The Chiefs have the number 2 unit as far as yards go in the league and have 3 of the best individual players at their respective positions right now, and Alex Smith, Kareem Hunt, and Travis Kelce. And yeah, Tyreek Hill isn't a scrub either. Did I mention they have 1 turnover through 5 games? Alex Smith has no interceptions. Kareem Hunt lost 1 fumble, which I'm sure you remember, Austin, was the very first touch of the season against the Patriots. So
Yeah.
the Chiefs have not turned the ball over since that point, going on way past a month now. The Steelers have done a pretty good job of keeping teams from scoring a ton of points, but they've yet to face a great offense, and they're going to have their hands full, to be honest with you. They gave up too much to teams like the Bears and the Jaguars, who are clearly one-dimensional teams. And assuming that everyone on the Chiefs, like Kelsey that you mentioned was injured, is playing, they're going to need to do one thing above all things else right now, because this offense runs through Kareem Hunt, who's averaging 6.3 yards a carry, and has been pretty good in the receiving game too. He's caught 16 of 17 targets for 166 yards, which is over 10 yards a catch, which for a running back that's a lot. And he's caught 2 touchdowns too. At the very least, if you can somehow slow down the running game, maybe keep him under 70 something rushing yards, you should have a chance to at least fight off the passing game. The Chiefs' one weakness on their offense has been the fact that they have given up a decent amount of sacks this year. So being one-dimensional is going to help your pass rushers get a head start on that, or at the very least, they'll be probably guessing correctly that they'll be throwing the ball. Uh, Outside of that, Artie Burns and Joe Hayden are going to have to be ready. Like I said, they really haven't been tested. Against the Bears and Jaguars, they really didn't have to do much at all. So this is probably going to be the first time we're going to see if they can really if they really have, really in the fact of Artie Burns, if he's really improved, and if Joe Hayden really can return to the form that he once was at. If they can manage to shut down those guys on the outside, the guys are really going to have to worry about are Kelsey and Hunt in the middle. And that's definitely scary, but it's much easier when you only have to worry about 2 guys as opposed to 4 guys or 6 guys. I wouldn't be as worried about guys like Conley or Wilson if you can manage to shut down Tyreek Hill as well. But no matter how you look at it, this is going to be a very tough game for the Steelers defense. And they don't inspire much confidence based on the way they played 2 of the last 3 weeks. But, they're, they're going to have their hands full. But, we'll learn just how good they really are this week. So that being said, what is the key for the Steelers' offense and defense this week? Let's start with the offense.
Sure. Just keep the play calling balance and change the tempo up through the game. When the offense was successful last week, and yes, they were successful at times last week, was when they did quick huddles and no huddles. So just keep bringing that back and just keep changing up the tempo is my key to offense. What's your key to the offense?
Convert in the red zone. If the Steelers had managed to score touchdowns as opposed to field goals last week, even 1 or 2 of those, we're talking about a completely different game. It's been the bugaboo for the Steelers for the last few years, and they're only going to have a chance to beat the Chiefs, the NFL's only remaining undefeated team, if they can convert in the red zone at least 3 times in my mind. So I think that's definitely a big key. On defense, Austin, I don't know what you have to say, but I think it's pretty simple.
Oh, yeah. I think we both agree here. It's just, please just do something about Kareem Hunt this week. It's just I'm begging this team. I don't care what they have to do. I honestly would, if the Steelers lose, I would feel better if they lost off of Tyreek Hill having 200 yards. I want to see something. I want to see the run game stopped, and I want to see Kareem Hunt stopped. That's it. What is your defensive key?
I said in a more broader term, stop the run, but I'm essentially talking about Kareem Hunt because he is an MVP candidate for a reason. New England Patriots and Bill Belichick generally have done a good job of taking away a team's best option over, the past 10, 15 years whenever they play somebody. I agree with you. I'd feel better about the Steelers losing this game if they still managed to shut down the Chiefs' best option, which is Kareem Hunt. So that's definitely a pretty obvious key, but one that still needs to be stated nonetheless. That being said, who's the X factor on offense? Who's going to be the guy that gets the Steelers going this week?
For me, I already mentioned him a couple times, Juju Smith-Schuster. Like I said, I really like his matchup in this game going against Chiefs cornerback Terrence Mitchell. I think he could have a game-changing stat line here, finally getting more than 60 yards in a game. Who is your offensive X factor?
In a similar role, I'm actually going to go with Eli Rogers, who's expected to return to the lineup. This is a thing, as I mentioned, the Steelers have been missing most of the season in the passing game has been the ability to have a receiver consistently working over the middle. And yes, Juju Smith-Schuster's done a good job of it, but maybe it'd be nice to have another guy in Eli Rogers who can do it so that Ben can have someone else he can trust over the middle there. As I said, it's going to help Roethlisberger, hopefully, if his confidence is shaken, to regain it, and then that'll help open up other facets of the Steelers' offense. On defense, I'll jump right into it, Austin. Mine is Bud Dupree. Like much of the defense last week, he did not play well. He struggled to set the edge last week and was pretty much a non factor as a pass rusher, which leads me to believe he still might not be 100% recovered from his injury, but his inconsistency has been worrisome nonetheless. When he's been good, the defense as a whole has been so much better, and I think if he can have a sack or two and can set the edge a little bit better than he did last week, I'll feel much better about the Steelers' chances of winning this game. Likewise, who is your X factor on the Steelers defense?
My X factor is Mike Mitchell. I want to see him come up on more run plays and make more stops. He's the last line of defense for this team, and I'm hoping he will help keep Kareem Hunt contained in case this team keeps up missing tackles like they have been. So, Mike Mitchell is my easy X factor here.
What are your bold predictions for Sunday's game? Remember, it's a 4:25 start time. Just throwing that out there.
Yep. Juju Smith-Schuster will get his first 100-yard game of his career with 7 catches for 117 yards and no penalties along with it. Then the Steelers will force 2 fumbles, one on Tyreek Hill and the other on Alex Smith, and the Steelers recovered both, which is only bold because, like you said, the Chiefs only have one all year, and the only one is on Kareem Hunt. And then finally, T.J. Watt has a great game forcing and recovering one of those aforementioned fumbles, getting a sack and recording 7 tackles in this game. What are your bold predictions?
Well, Austin, my first bold prediction is that I think the Steelers get to Alex Smith 3 times. They sack him 3 times and intercept him for the first time this season. I think it's going to be Mike Mitchell who gets it, your defensive X factor. I think my offensive X factor, Eli Rogers, is going to get back into the offense in a big way with 6 catches for 80 yards and his first touchdown of the season. I also think Cameron Hayward has 2 of the Steelers' 3 sacks and a pass knockdown on the line of scrimmage. Remember, Hayward had 3 sacks against the Chiefs in Week 4 of last season. So, after all we've talked about, the Steelers have their backs are up against the wall. This could be we should learn a lot about who the Steelers really are, about how much they really have in them when they travel to Arrowhead, play in one of the toughest buildings in the league against the only undefeated team left in football. Do the Steelers come out on top on Sunday?
I actually have them bouncing back and winning 24-21 in I guess a surprise win. So, yeah, Steelers win 24-21. What do you have?
It's strange. I know like we were all really down on them on Sunday, but this just feels like the kind of game the Steelers have just had the Chiefs number over the last few years. I don't know. It doesn't make sense. They should not be able to stop Kareem Hunt, but I think the Steelers are just going to play a game that they know they have to play better, and I think they're going to win by the same margin, 3 points, but by a final score of 27-24. I think it'll be a great game regardless, and I think this is one the Steelers just can't afford to lose in the early going of this, I guess getting into the midway point of this season, because it only gets harder as things go on. So Austin and I both have the Chiefs losing for the first time since January 15th when they lost to the Steelers as well in the playoffs. So now we can look around the NFL, do our regular pick'em challenge. Austin, can you look up the numbers for how we're doing this season while I get into the first matchup?
Sure.
Okay, so first things first, we have Jay Cutler and the Miami Dolphins at the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons are huge favorites at 12.5 points. I'm just going to say right now, Austin, I have the Falcons covering in this matchup. The Dolphins won last week over the Titans. It was not a very good game. It was a pretty close game, if I recall. Jay Cutler just inspires nothing for me, and they're facing the Falcons at home. The reigning NFC champions should have no trouble dispatching of the Dolphins, wouldn't you say?
I think that the Dolphins have shown nothing. The Dolphins, I think, if this might have been for last week, but they only had 3 offensive touchdowns all year. So I think the Falcons are going to cover this quite easily. And just go through the next one because I accidentally clicked on the wrong podcast.
Okay. So yeah, if you think the Steelers are having, troublesome times on offense, which they are, just remember it could be worse. It could be the Dolphins. The Green Bay Packers are in Minnesota taking on the Vikings. The Packers are 3-point favorites on the road. Look, the Vikings have a solid team. They've definitely shown that they have a pretty good core, but their offense has suffered without Dalvin Cook, and they're still missing Sam Bradford, who played a bit last week but did not play very well. I think the Packers cover on the road. Had it been a healthy Sam Bradford, I don't know. I might have taken the Vikings, but right now I have the Packers covering in this one.
I am also going to agree. I think the Packers have got this quite easily, and they covered by 3. And we actually did not add it up yet. I honestly can't do it in my head. Probably. If you guys couldn't tell by how bad I am today, I'm so out of it. But we're 13-19 without adding last week's yet. We didn't do it yet. We'll have it for you next week, or if not on Twitter.
Okay.
Not next week, on our next podcast.
All right, we'll figure it out. Next game, Lions at Saints. The Saints are 4.5-point favorites at the Superdome. Who do you got?
I have the Saints actually covering. I was surprised to see that Saints were favored. I thought I was picking an upset at first, and I'm not. I'm just picking the Saints covering, which just feels weird. But what do you have?
I think Vegas was disappointed in the Lions offense for the second week in a row, but I am going to take the Lions to win outright here. I'm just not impressed with the Saints defense at all, and I don't think that they're that good of a football team. The New England Patriots are on the road against the Jets. The Patriots are 9-point favorites on the road in this AFC East matchup between teams that are tied, as a matter of fact. So I guess you could say battle for the first place in the AFC East, at least between these two teams. The Bills also have the same record, is up for grabs right now. Who are you picking here?
You know what? I'm going to do it. I am actually going to pick the Jets to win here. I had the Jets Jets plus 9. I didn't think New England could beat them by 9. But I'm actually going to change it to the Jets win outright because I have a feeling. And I've seen that New England defense, and it is really rough. It is really bad. I'm going to have the Jets win outright. They're going to get blown out. But I want to pick this just in case. Just in case that AC joint sprain on Tom Brady really affects him where he has to come out of the game. I have the Jets. Who do you have?
Well, I actually have the Jets plus 9. Look, it's an AFC East game. The Patriots are on the road. Their defense has been terrible. The Jets have been much better this season than we originally anticipated. Yes, they're 3-2. It's not that far into the season, but they've certainly impressed so far. When everyone thought they were just 0-16, I don't think they win this game. But Austin, I'll tell you this: if the Jets somehow do manage to win this game, I'll buy you a cake. Okay?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Will it be yodels?
That's not a cake, but that's a bit of an inside joke. FYI, podcast listeners. But in any case, I will take the Jets plus 9. I'd love to see them upend the Patriots, but I think we could really start the concern about the Patriots should they lose this game, but we'll see. 49ers at Redskins. Redskins are big 11-point favorites at home. Who do you have here?
49ers are terrible, but 49ers plus 11 still because the Redskins aren't that good. They're, I believe, 2-2 at the moment, and it's just I don't think the 49ers are bad enough to blow the game by that much. What do you think?
I'm kind of confused. I don't know what to make of the Redskins right now. Now that you mentioned that they're 2-2, I do remember that they're coming off a bye week, so they should win this game. But at the same point, the Niners have also been on the East Coast for this is now the second week, so they shouldn't have trouble adjusting to the time. They are a bad football team, but 11 points is a lot, so I'll take the 49ers plus 11. Chicago at Baltimore. The Ravens are 6.5-point favorites. Do you have an upset here?
I have the Bears winning outright, probably just because I'm salty because the Bears won outright against the Steelers when they were favored, so I have that. But, I mean, the Jaguars also destroyed the Ravens as well, so, I mean, it's not totally out of the question. But what do you have?
It would just kind of be the Ravens thing to kind of like piss off Steeler fans by just destroying the Bears. So I feel like the Ravens are going to cover here, gaining some steam after smacking down the Raiders in Oakland. So I think the Ravens cover. Browns at Texans. The Texans are 9.5-point favorites at home.
I have the Texans covering. The Browns are bad. I don't understand why, but the Browns are just never getting better. They're just stuck in an infinite loop of being bad. Who do you have?
Tanking forever. Even minus J.J. Watt and Whitney Merciless, the Texans' offense is catching fire, and the Browns' defense should not be able to stop them. I'll take the Texans to cover. Tampa Bay Buccaneers at Arizona Cardinals. The Bucs are 1.5 favorites on the road. Austin, the Cardinals' offense is dismal, and although the Bucs haven't really been that impressive themselves, I think they have to cover here, don't they?
I think the Buccaneers cover. I think this was a little bit of a Vegas messing up. I think Tampa Bay might actually have a blowout game here. You know what? I'll call it now. I think Buccaneers win by 20 here. I'm just gonna say I thought they got really disrespected. I think that it's gonna show. What do you have?
Well, I have the same thing. I don't think that highly of the Cardinals right now. I think they're just not a good football team, and like I said, I don't think that they're that great. The Bucs are, but there's no reason they shouldn't be able to beat the Cardinals, even if they are at home. The LA Rams, they've scored. I believe they have the number one offense in the NFC as far as points go. Going into all of a sudden the stout Jacksonville Jaguars, who are 2.5-point favorites at home.
I have the Rams winning outright. I think the Rams are the better team. I think Jacksonville has just been getting off easy with teams really underperforming, such as the Ravens, and as we saw last week with the Steelers. It's just I don't think the Jaguars are that good. They lost to the Jets. Let's not forget that. So Rams win. Who do you got?
This is a tough game for a team in LA that's traveling to the East Coast to play the Jaguars, who have a fearsome secondary. Todd Gurley's going to have a good day, but I don't see Jared Goff having a great day, and I think he's going to make a couple of young quarterback mistakes. I don't know. Maybe Blake Bortles will have to throw the ball more than 14 times, and maybe that's how they'll win. Who knows? But I'll take the Jaguars to cover just because I don't want the Steelers' loss to look as bad as it did. I just want it to look like the Jaguars are a little bit better than I think they actually are. LA Chargers at the Oakland Raiders. No line right now, so Austin and I are going to just make score-by-score predictions. So who do you have winning and what's the score?
I'm going to take the Chargers to win 31-21. Who do you got?
I'll take the Raiders to win this one 24-20. It feels like every time the Raiders play the Chargers, they always block a punt or something like that. I don't know if you've noticed that, but I think it happens like every year or something like that. There's always a special teams play. I think that'll be the difference here. The Chargers lose another close one, 24-20. The hapless Giants go to Denver to take on the Broncos, who are 11.5-point favorites at Mile High.
Oh, man. The poor Giants here. Oh, if anyone listened to the last podcast, I said I think the Giants have their own Eli Rogers. I don't know why I said that specifically, but the receiver I was thinking of was Roger Lewis, not Eli Rogers. That was the one guy they have left. But I have the Broncos covering here because the Giants, I don't even know if they're going to attempt to pass this game. They might just rush the whole time, and that's not good when their line is really bad as well as their running backs. I mean, they got nothing good going here. I think Wayne Gallman has been doing pretty good late as he's come in, but still, I don't really think highly of him. What do you have?
The Giants don't have a number one running back on their roster, and right now they don't have a healthy receiver that should be active outside of Sterling Shepard, who I think is injured as well. It's time to start thinking for next year for the Giants. So, see what you have at receiver, see what you have at running back. There's no reason to think they'll do anything successful, though. I'd be surprised if they score more than 6 points. So I'll take the Denver Broncos to cover easily. Indy Colts at the Tennessee Titans for Monday Night Football. There's no line score right here. Again, the status of Marcus Mariota is up in the air. So I'm going to assume that he plays, and I think the Titans just absolutely whip the Colts, who are just a terrible football team, have the worst point differential in the NFL by a score of 35-10. Who do you have here? Are you assuming Mariota plays, or do you think he's out?
I think Mariota plays, and I'm actually going to pick the Colts to win anyway. I think Jacoby Brissett has been fantastic for the Colts since he's gotten there. And I'm going to pick the upset here, and I'm going to say the Colts win 30-24.
All right, interesting. Interesting for sure. Last game, as we already discussed, Steelers and Chiefs. I took the. We both took the Steelers to win outright. I don't know why I put Steelers plus 4.5. I was thinking like the point differential, but we both have the Steelers winning because we already mentioned our final scores. So just a last thing to mention, there are 4 teams on a bye this week, including the Buffalo Bills, Cincinnati Bengals, Dallas Cowboys, who are now without Ezekiel Elliott, and the Seattle Seahawks. So just remember to look out for that. That now means 10 teams will have had bye weeks after this week. Austin, is there anything else you want to wrap up with or say before we finish things up tonight?
No, I think I'm good.
Alrighty. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. If you have any questions about the show or you want to ask us questions about the Steelers, feel free to email us at strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com. Check out our various social media pages. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. You can find all that and more on our website at strongerthansteelnfl.blogspot.com. Austin, thank you as always for joining me. I will be leaving for Long Island tomorrow with my girlfriend. So Austin and I don't know if we're going to be doing a pregame show or anything like that. We'll figure something out. But we're hoping to do one episode together. We'll see if we'll have time. I'll be in Long Island until Tuesday morning. So I'm sure we can get something done. We'll figure something out, Austin. But in any case, I'm looking forward to seeing him and hopefully getting to see the game on Sunday. So hopefully the Steelers win. Because after all, the Chiefs haven't lost since they last played the Steelers, which we saw together, Austin.
Yeah, and it'd be quite good to see it happen twice, and then it would just be a thing. Every time the Steelers play the Chiefs, we need to be together, otherwise they'll lose.
Exactly. So that'll be something to look forward to. But ladies and gentlemen, thanks again for joining us. And Austin, you have a fantastic night.